Buying a used car? Avoid costly problems by checking a car's history. Get a report instantly by entering the reg on carvertical.com. Hello, welcome back to TGTV, and more specifically, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my SLS AMG. My SLS AMG is back on the channel, ladies and gentlemen. It's had a bit of a hiatus of late. I don't think it's been, well, it's probably been a few months since I last had this car on the channel, and to be honest with you, it's been in storage following its Suntech Altered Black PPF update, whereby I put some vintage 300 SL black livery on the car. It's been in storage pretty much since then. That's the last you saw of this car. So today we are taking it to get that. Good Lord, what is wrong with people? London, ladies and gentlemen. So today we are taking the car to Posh Customs in London, whereby they will be removing the Altered Black PPF. I fancied a change for the summer. It's going back to its stock livery, if you like, just silver. But on this trip, we're going to talk about the car market, because the car market is a topic of discussion. The watch market at the moment is a topic of discussion as well. We've come out of COVID, when we've come into a period of rising interest rates. We've got the war in Ukraine. Russia have attacked Ukraine. And there's a little bit of chitter chatter that I want to kind of deal with and offer my thoughts on, because I'm getting asked all the time, what do I think of the car market? I've already done a video on the watch market, which I waffled out. I didn't plan it. I just kind of punted it out without even thinking that I was going to make the video. It was 15 minutes of filming. I forgot some points, but I covered the main things that I wanted to cover. But I wanted to go into the car market, because the car market is slightly different. The car market is its own kind of entity, and I think the landscape of the car market has changed since where it was in 2008, which is going to be a period that people bring up the entire time throughout the kind of coming months, when people are trying to work out what's going to happen. I don't think the car market is what it was back then. Just like the watch market, the landscape has changed, things have evolved, and the way that cars and watches are viewed, I think, has changed slightly. Not completely, but it has changed. So, where to start then? I'll start with my own collection. That's going to be an easy place to start. What am I doing? Am I getting out of my cars? Am I panicking? The answer on that is no. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to try and sell everything up this summer. I really don't think there is cause for concern, unless you've grossly overpaid for something that's still in production, that isn't actually that limited. And this goes for watches as well. As you've grossly overpaid for something that's still in production, that isn't that limited, that's going to be made a lot more of, particularly when supply chains increase again and things pick back up again, and you can't afford for any softening at all, then I would sell. But that is only a very, very, very small percentage of people. But most of you out there buying, particularly, we're going to talk about the supercar market, and we'll touch on kind of the sports car entry-level stuff, so your F-types, your early R8, those sorts of things as well in this discussion. But unless you've hugely grossly overpaid for something like a an SF90 over list, or something really pretty silly, and you can't afford to lose 20-30 grand on it, and that 20-30 grand is going to ruin your life, I don't think you have any real concern to worry about. So we're going to start with my collection anyway. Have I sold anything? I've actually sold one of my cars, which I'm going to go into, but that isn't actually economic landscape related. That's my own economic landscape related, and that's actually to kind of further my collection down the line. So one has gone, we will get onto that, but things like my SLS, things like the Testarossa, things like the Carrera GT, you know, blue chip collectible stuff, it's going nowhere. I'm not getting rid of anything. I bought them all well, and I really don't think there's any need to come out of things in a flap. Obviously, if your personal situation dictates getting rid of things, then get rid of them. But in terms of kind of trying to see ahead and thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Is it going to be a 2008 where everything's worth 30p? I really don't think it is. There's so much money swirling around. There's still going to be the demand there. Employment's still fine to an extent. Interest rates haven't gone bonkers. They're up to 1%, which is going to have, it's going to kick some people in the nuts, but I suspect the kind of people buying supercars, they're not going to care that their mortgage has gone up a few hundred quid. They're not going to care that their heating bill's gone up a few hundred quid. And I think there's enough money in the system, enough demand in the system, and enough people that'll be unaffected by it to stave that off, coupled with the fact that inflation will continue I would say, for at least another year or so. They're not going to cut it dead with just a little rise in interest rates. I think they're trying to tail it off. I think retail prices will increase. So your things like a brand new 992, for example, that will increase. The retail price on a 992 probably will jump by about 10%, I'd say, over the next year or so. And they have actually already jumped a little bit already as a result of supply chain issues, prices of steel, prices of wiring looms, changes in supply chains from Ukraine for wiring looms on 992s to other things. So I think that rise in retail prices will actually stave off some of the softening or mitigate some of the softening in the used market. But in terms of a dramatic crash, I just don't think that's going to be there for a majority of cars. In terms of where I've been buying, you may well have noticed over the past 18 months, 2 years, that I've moved more into the collectibles, more into the discontinued stuff, and I've dabbled less in the modern stuff. Early viewers on my channel will have seen me kind of coming in and out of new cars willy-nilly, and that was really a period of, you know, every single new car was over list price. You could come in and out of them basically for free. And over the past 18 months, I kind of stopped doing that. I started, when things slowed down in 2020, I actually started buying collectibles. Things like SLSs, things like Carrera GTs, Testarossas, 997 RS, you know, things like that. Things that they don't make anymore. There's going to be an increasing demand over the next 10 to 15 years of people that grew up with these things, that want these things. And that was kind of almost subconscious, in that I thought it can't last forever, the kind of the modern hype banging on and on and on and going over list price and, you know, just coming in and out of these things for free. And also, actually, it was largely a passion-based decision, because I felt that a lot of new cars, I was actually getting bored of them. So those two things combined, I actually made the conscious kind of decision to shift away from modern bits on the whole and kind of come into more discontinued bits. Stuff that supply really is limited. They are genuinely scarce, and not just scarce for the time being. You know, things like new Range Rovers and 992s, I keep bringing them up, but I did make that decision. So in terms of my collection, in terms of like where I am with it and where I think things are going and whether or not I'm worried, I'm not hugely worried. The increase I've seen in value on my cars and where I am equity-wise on them, on the finance, of course, rates are going to jump up. And, you know, when I come to refinance this and all my other cars, I'll find my payments will go up a little bit. But in terms of where I am on them, I've got so much more equity in them now because of the rise in value. I think that's going to negate that as well. So by the time I come to, for argument's sake, refinance this car, I paid $135, maybe $140 for this car. Retail's probably $180 on it. So, you know, we've got 40 grand extra equity in it, which is going to have an effect on my monthly payments when I come to redo the finance. That's going to be offset largely by an increase in rates. But I think if you've bought well over the past few years, I don't think there's any reason to panic. A softening, unless it's completely dramatic and unforeseen and, you know, catastrophic for a reason I can't actually even think of, you're going to be fine. I think you're going to be absolutely fine. And, you know, if you've bought a 992 GT3 with a wing on it for 275 grand, which some people have, I don't suspect they're going to be the kind of people that care whether or not they lose 30, 40 grand on that. That was always going to happen anyway. And, you know, if you buy a limited car that isn't that limited, like a GT3, for example, particularly the newer generations, at grossly over list price, we're talking 130, 140 grand over list price, and you expect to retain the value on that, you're off your rocker anyway. So I don't think those people are A, going to be surprised, or B, going to be too bothered by that. I'm trying to find my hazard warnings to say thank you. Oh, there they are. Wonderful stuff. Now, elephant in the room, interest rates, rising living costs. I did mention that early on. It's something that I didn't really tackle too much of in my Watch Talk video. I kind of just glossed over that issue, and that is the elephant in the room. You know, thousands of households are going to see an average increase apparently of about £1,200 a year in living costs. People are cancelling their Netflix subscriptions to try and combat that extra rise in living costs. But at this end of the market, this kind of stuff, and I don't mean to sound like a prat or a knobhead or insensitive or deluded by saying it, but I really don't think that end of the market is going to be affected by that. I don't think the average person buying a Hurricane or a GT3 is cancelling their Netflix as a result of rising living costs. And that's not me being horrible about it, but I just think that's the crux of the issue. And I also think a lot of people that have potentially overpaid for stuff, I think they're going to be hard pressed to actually sell. If you've overpaid for something, the last thing you want to do is sell and realize your loss. So I think there are going to be a lot of people just hodling onto things for the next year or two, see where things are going. So it is a bit of a different market on the supercar side of things. The blue chip, hypercar, top level stuff, and I know a lot of guys that are collecting these things, they're in on a whole host of silly cars for millions of pounds, and I've not heard any talk of anyone selling up anything. The rising living costs and interest rates and whatnot going up, they don't really, on the whole, care. There's no chat amongst any of the WhatsApp groups I'm in of anyone getting rid of things or panicking. There's no real panic at that level. And things like CGTs, that are alternative asset classes, I don't again think that they're going to be chucked on the bonfire. I don't see your average CGT owner, and that's not me, I'm not an average CGT owner. I shouldn't have that car. There's no way I should have a CGT. I'm not that level. I shouldn't have it, I do have it, but I think your average CGT owner isn't going to chuck stuff on the bonfire to kind of potentially fuel their house for another year. Just isn't going to happen, I don't think. So on the blue chip and truly scarce, collectible, iconic, long-term, stratospheric cars like your CGTs, your F50s, your Enzos, your F40s, your Zondas, your Huayras, all that kind of stuff, forget it. They're genuinely scarce, and I don't think there's going to be a flood of them on the market. Conversely now, your F-types, your R8s, your M4s, that level, you know, your 40 to 70 grand cars, your kind of cars that guys that are sort of not earning mental money but earning decent whack are coming into, stretched a bit and kind of pushed the boundaries out and kind of got into on a bit of a stretch, like your kind of your Rolex Submariners, your steel stuff, and they've got in because there's a buoyant market, and they thought, do you know what, I'm overspending a little bit, I'm spending more than I normally would, but the market's buoyant, I'm in. And they've overspent a little bit, they've paid a little bit more than the car would have otherwise been worth in a normal market, and they get hit with an extra 500 quid, 600 quid a month in rent payments, fuel bills, heating bills, electricity bills. They're the ones that might start to get squeaky bums and think, I'm going to come out of this. That end of the market has started to soften a tiny bit. And if I'm honest with you, I'm not even remotely surprised by that. That end of the market has just been going bonkers. I know Mahmood tends to kind of flitter around in that market and buys and sells a lot of cars. You know, he'll drive a car for 6 months. He's been driving around, getting in and out of cars for free for pretty much 6 months, a year, maybe 18 months. So that softening is not surprising. I actually don't even think it's a softening. I think it's a correction at most extreme. And it's just, I think they're going to reach a level that they should have been at. They've been at an artificial level for quite some time. And I don't think it's a crashing. I just think it's actually quite a sensible correction. And it's long overdue. Now, the people that are scaremongering, saying, you know, this is going to be the next collapse, you know, everyone's going to die, those are naysayers. Those people have been saying that for 5 years. They've been wanting that for 5 years. Those are people that have got an invested interest in things going to pot. Those are people that aren't in the market for these things. They're probably never going to be in the market for these things, and they actually want the market to go on its knees so they can hoover up some bargains. They're the same sort of people that have actually been banging the drum about crypto, banging on and on about it, trying to manifest a pump in crypto. They're heavily invested in it and they're trying to pump it, just like actually what I do with my cars and my Instagram stories. But they're the sort of people that have been talking the market down, and you've got to look at these people. Have they got an invested interest in things going to pot? Have they got an invested interest in trying to talk the market down? 99 times out of 100 they do. Obviously I've got an invested interest in talking the market up, but I don't think that a lot of stuff like my 992 Turbo S, for example, that's not going to continue to rise. That's not going to continue past £250,000, which is what they are now, the Turbo S cabs. That's not going to continue to rise. That's going to soften off a little bit, I suspect. 10, 20 grand over the next year. There's not many more of them coming through. The supply's completely screwed on those. Raw materials are going through the roof. Porsche have done 2 price updates already on them in the past 12 months, and I suspect there's going to be another one coming. So I don't think they're going to continue to rise, and I don't think a lot of the mass-produced stuff like your 992 GT3s, 992 Turbo S's, your SF90s, they will come off a little bit. But I think that was always going to happen. I don't think it's going to be led by you know, people spending a few more £100 a month on their mortgage. I don't think that's what's going to happen. We will see the bottom end of the market softening a little bit. We'll see the middle part of the market softening off a little bit. And I think we'll actually see the top end blue chip stuff actually strengthening up as people seek to actually hedge against inflation, put their money into alternative assets. The same with watches. I think your standard steel Rolexes, your Pepsis, they're going to go from 25 grand down to like 22 grand, which is still stupid. I know I've just plucked some arbitrary numbers out of the air, but I think those sorts of people, the people that came into them uncomfortably in the first place, will seek to drop those out and actually realise some gain over the next sort of 12 months, potentially, if their bills go up a bit. But you know, the big dogs, and I'm not putting myself in that category, I'm a separate category because these cars are work and they're kind of just business assets, and you know, I need them for the channel and whatnot, and I've bought right on them. But you know, your blue chip watches, your indies, your genuinely scarce things, I think they'll be fine, because there's a lot of artificial scarcity in the watch world, and a little bit of artificial scarcity in the car world, things that are kind of being seen to be a lot more scarce than they actually are. But your steel Rolexes, even your steel Pateks, they're not really that scarce. There's dealers sitting on scores and scores and scores of these things. So just be aware that that doesn't really apply to the car world. There aren't dealers sitting on a ton of brand new cars per se, just holding them back on the market like there is in the watch world. But I think if you want to be really safe, buy the collectibles, buy the icons, buy the genuinely scarce discontinued stuff, because it doesn't take a genius to work out that if things are still being made and there's a temporary glitch in supply chains now, and there's going to be a flood of supply, then the price will drop. But I don't think there's any reason to panic. I really don't, particularly if you're in some collectible stuff. I don't think there's any reason to panic. And on the watch front as well, I know loads of you are into watches. I don't think there's any reason to panic. If you are in things for retail, you're in rare stuff, indie stuff, iconic stuff, vintage stuff, I think you're going to be absolutely fine. I don't think there's going to be much of a wobble at all, if anything. But I do think if you're in the mass-produced production stuff that you've overpaid heavily for, you know, if you've paid 25, 30 grand for a Pepsi, a modern, still produced Pepsi, and you really care whether or not that on paper loses 2 grand, then you're going to care probably about the next 12 months, maybe. But if you don't care, you like what you've bought anyway, and you've bought for the right reasons, there's absolutely no reason to sell, no reason to panic whatsoever, and I think you will be absolutely fine. And there's no reason to flap. I may be made to eat my words. I've not really been wrong on this channel yet. We may well be looking at this video in a couple of years thinking, TG, you're a complete prat, you had no idea what was going on. But from a personal perspective, I'm not flapping, I'm not selling, keeping all my watches, keeping all my cars. We survived COVID, we'll survive a little hike in rates. Everyone knew this was coming. It shouldn't be any surprise to anyone, and you should have kind of just seen this coming. So I actually don't think there's any reason to flap. Anyway, hopefully that reassures people. Hopefully nobody is too stressed about the upcoming, what's gonna happen. Let's get out of the car then, because I've been sat here for a little while, and I'll just take you around the outside and show you what's going on with this car, because it's actually a little bit of a state at the moment. So here we are then, here she is, resplendent with Suntech Altered Black film on it. Now many of you remember when I did this, I actually got full PPF and paint correction done to the car at the same time underneath that black film. So it was a little bit Marmite. Some of you loved what I did, some of you saw what I was doing with the IWC 300SL racing car livery on the car with the black bonnet and the black side strakes there. But a lot of you actually hated it. It wasn't something that I ever intended, which I said in the video, wasn't something I ever intended to be permanent. It's been on there a little bit longer than expected, but I've just been a very busy bee, flying around all over the world, churning a load of ads. So actually, it's time for it to come off. I've come to Posh Customs. They're actually where, if you've been to Posh Wash before, Posh Customs, they're actually in the same place. So we go down underneath here, and they've actually worked on my car before. I got my Range Rover wheels fitted. I've done a load of bits and bobs with them. So they will be taking that PPF off. But I absolutely love this car. I think it's fantastic. It's still done only 19,000 miles. It's got full Benz history. It's not due a service anytime soon. It's just a brilliant car. And I actually regret not using it as much as I have. But these, again, as I said in the video, these are collectible, they're iconic, and there's absolutely no reason you shouldn't go and buy one of these ASAP, because they are drying up. They're going into collections, one-way door collections of guys that are just sitting on these now. It's a modern 300SL, and I just think these are absolutely fantastic news. With one going at auction recently with Historics. It's actually coming up on the 21st of May for about 200 grand, including fees. So these are on their way. past 200, 250 thereabouts over the next couple of years, and I just think they're fantastic. Above all that, above all the values and whatnot, it's an extremely comfortable, extremely capable, noisy, iconic piece of Mercedes history. Great car. So check back in on the channel very shortly, because there'll be a video of me collecting this, and they're going to detail it and do some other bits and bobs with the car to make it look absolutely incredible. So that video will be coming very soon to the channel. For now then, thank you so much for watching. Do remember to subscribe, because some of you don't, you swines. I see the stats. 50% of you watching have subscribed, 50% of you haven't, so make sure you go and subscribe. And I'll see you all very, very soon. Let me know what you think of my SLS. Should I leave it standard, or should I take the black film off as I'm about to do? Hope you're all keeping well, stay safe, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Ciao.